The tear-streaked face of Olivia Jenkins reflected in the flickering glow of the solitary candle that burned at the altar of Cottonwood Springs' only church. Her black mourning dress, absorbing what little light there was as dusk settled over the empty wooden pews. She had been coming here every evening for 3 weeks, since they'd lowered her husband Thomas into the unforgiving Arizona soil, finding solace in the quietude that the modest chapel offered when the rest of the bustling frontier town had gone about its business. April 1878 had been cruel to 25-year-old Olivia. The tuberculosis that claimed Thomas had come swiftly and without mercy, leaving her alone with their small ranch, a mountain of debts and memories that haunted her like ghosts in every corner of their home. The townsfolk had been kind enough, bringing food and offering condolences, but their generosity had begun to wane as the days passed. Soon, she knew, the bank would come for the ranch. Lost in her grief, Olivia didn't hear the church door creak open, nor the soft footfalls of worn leather boots on the wooden floor. It wasn't until the stranger cleared his throat that she realized she was no longer alone. "Pardon me, madam," came a deep, gentle voice from behind her. "Didn't mean to disturb your prayers." Olivia hastily wiped her tears with a handkerchief and turned to see a tall man standing at the back of the church. The fading sunlight through the windows cast his face in shadow, but she could make out broad shoulders beneath a dusty trail coat and the distinct silhouette of a cowboy hat held respectfully in his hands. "The church is open to all," she replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "Please don't let me keep you from your devotions." The stranger nodded and moved quietly toward the altar. As he stepped into the dim light of the candle, Olivia could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of long days under the relentless desert sun. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, regarded her with a gentle concern that seemed genuine rather than merely polite. He reached into his pocket and produced a match, striking it against the rough wood of a pew before lighting a second candle beside her own. "Samuel Keating," he said simply, offering a slight bow of his head. "Just passing through on my way north to Colorado." "Olivia Jenkins," she replied, noticing the way his hands, calloused and strong, sheltered the flame from the draft until it caught properly. "Though most everyone in town knows me as the widow Jenkins now." Samuel's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Jenkins." "Thank you," she said automatically, the words having become a reflexive response to the many condolences she'd received. They fell into silence as Samuel knelt at the altar, removing his hat and bowing his head in prayer. Olivia found herself studying him curiously. His clothes were worn but clean, his dark hair a touch too long, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. A gun belt hung at his hip, as was common for men traveling the territories, but he didn't have the hard look of the gunslingers that occasionally passed through Cottonwood Springs. When he finished his prayer, he remained kneeling, seemingly lost in thought. Finally, he spoke without turning to face her. "Sometimes I think God puts us in certain places at certain times for reasons we can't understand right away," he said quietly. "I wasn't planning to stop in Cottonwood Springs. Something just told me to get off my horse and come in here." Olivia wasn't sure how to respond. "Are you a religious man, Mr. Keating?" He turned then, a slight smile touching his lips. "Not as much as my mother would like, but I believe in something greater than ourselves." He gestured to the candle he'd lit. "My mother always said a candle helps guide lost souls. I light one whenever I find myself in a church." "My husband believed that," Olivia said, her voice catching. "He used to say that even in the darkest times, a single flame could bring hope." Samuel nodded, rising to his feet. "Wise man, your husband." "He was," she agreed, fighting back fresh tears. "But wisdom didn't save him from consumption, or save our ranch from the bank that's coming to claim it next week." She hadn't meant to share that with a stranger, but the words had tumbled out before she could stop them. To his credit, Samuel didn't offer empty platitudes or unwanted advice. "Life out here can be mighty harsh on those left behind," he said simply. "Yes," Olivia whispered. "Yes, it can." The church fell silent again, save for the occasional pop and hiss of the candle flames. Outside, the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the distant mountains, plunging the small frontier town into darkness. "Will you be staying in town long, Mr. Keating?" Olivia asked, more to fill the silence than out of genuine curiosity. "Hadn't planned on it," he replied. "But plans have a way of changing." He looked at her thoughtfully. "This ranch of yours, is there no way to save it?" Olivia shook her head. "Thomas borrowed heavily last year after the drought. We lost half our cattle. The bank wants $300 by next Friday or they'll auction the property." She gave a bitter laugh. "Might as well be asking for the moon." Samuel nodded slowly, considering her words. "300 is a fair sum, right enough. More than fair," Olivia agreed. "It's impossible." "Nothing's impossible, Mrs. Jenkins," Samuel said, his voice carrying a quiet conviction. "Just improbable." Before Olivia could respond, the church door opened again, and Reverend Miller stepped inside, looking surprised to find anyone in his church at this hour. "Mrs. Jenkins," he nodded kindly. "And Samuel Keating, Reverend," Samuel said, extending his hand, "just passing through." "Well, Mr. Keating, you're welcome in God's house," the Reverend said, shaking his hand, "but I'm afraid I need to lock up for the night." Olivia stood, smoothing her black dress. "Of course, Reverend. I was just leaving." Samuel retrieved his hat, placing it back on his head. "As was I." They walked out together into the cool night air. The main street of Cottonwood Springs was quiet, with only the saloon showing signs of life, its windows glowing with lamplight and the sound of a tinny piano drifting through the darkness. "Where are you staying, Mr. Keating?" Olivia asked as they stood on the church steps. "Haven't sorted that yet," he admitted. "Is there a decent boarding house in town?" "Mrs. Abernathy runs one just down the street," Olivia pointed. "It's clean and her rates are fair." Samuel nodded his thanks. "And you, Mrs. Jenkins, do you return to your ranch tonight?" "Yes," Olivia replied. "It's only a mile outside of town. My horse is hitched at the general store." "Then I'll walk you there," Samuel said, not as a question but as a simple statement of fact. "These streets may be quiet, but it's no place for a lady alone after dark." Ordinarily, Olivia might have protested that she'd been making the same walk for weeks without incident, but something in his manner, not presumptuous, but protective, made her accept his offer with a nod. They walked in companionable silence to the general store, where Olivia's mare waited patiently. Samuel checked the saddle straps and helped her mount, his strong hands steadying her as she settled into the saddle. "Thank you, Mr. Keating," she said, looking down at him, "for the company and the kindness." "The pleasure was mine, Mrs. Jenkins," he replied, his blue eyes reflecting the starlight. "Perhaps our paths will cross again before I continue north." Olivia surprised herself by hoping they would. "Perhaps," she agreed. "Good night, Mr. Keating." "Good night, Mrs. Jenkins," he said, stepping back from her horse. "And remember what I said about impossible things." Olivia rode home under a canopy of stars, her thoughts occupied by the mysterious cowboy who had lit a candle and spoken of impossibilities as if they were merely challenges to be overcome. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something other than grief and fear, a tiny spark of curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the spring sun warming the land around Olivia's modest ranch. She went about her chores mechanically, feeding the few remaining cattle and tending to the small kitchen garden that provided most of her food. The work kept her hands busy, but did little to quiet her mind, which kept returning to the stranger from the church. By mid-morning, she had convinced herself that Samuel Keating was probably already miles away, continuing his journey north. She was startled, therefore, when she looked up from weeding the garden to see a horse and rider approaching along the dirt road that led to her property. As the rider drew closer, she recognized the broad shoulders and dark hat of Samuel Keating. He rode with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle, guiding his chestnut gelding with subtle shifts of his weight rather than the reins. "Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins," he called as he neared the fence line. "Hope you don't mind an uninvited visitor." Olivia straightened, brushing soil from her hands onto her apron. "Not at all, Mr. Keating, though I'm surprised to see you. I thought you'd be on your way to Colorado by now." Samuel dismounted, tying his horse to the fence post. Like I said, plans change. I got to thinking about your situation and I wanted to talk to you about it, if you're willing. Curiosity piqued. Olivia nodded. I was just about to take a break and have some coffee. Would you care to join me? That would be most welcome, Samuel said, removing his hat as he followed her to the small porch that wrapped around the front of the ranch house. Olivia busied herself with the coffee pot while Samuel settled into one of the two rocking chairs that flanked the porch. She tried not to notice how the chair had been Thomas's favorite spot to watch the sunset, or how different Samuel looked sitting there, taller, broader, more alive than the ghost of her husband that haunted her memories. It's a fine piece of land you have here, Samuel remarked as she handed him a steaming cup of coffee. Good water, decent grazing, no wonder you're fighting to keep it. It was Thomas's dream, Olivia said, taking the other chair. We came out here from Missouri 5 years ago. Started with nothing but 20 acres and 10 head of cattle. Built it up to 60 acres and 50 head before, her voice trailed off. Before the drought, Samuel finished for her. Yes, she nodded, and then Thomas getting sick, everything seemed to fall apart at once. Samuel sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm going to be direct with you if that's all right, please, she said, and call me Olivia. Mrs. Jenkins reminds me too much of condolence calls. Olivia then, he agreed with a slight smile, and I'm Samuel. The thing is, I might be able to help with your situation. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, but she tempered her hope with caution. How so? I've been working cattle drives for the past 8 years, Samuel explained. Saved most of what I earned, planning to buy my own spread someday. I've got about $400 to my name. Olivia stared at him, processing his words. Are you offering to lend me the money for the bank? Not exactly, Samuel said, shifting slightly in his chair. I'm proposing a partnership of sorts. I'd pay off your debt to the bank, and in return, I'd work the ranch with you. We'd split whatever profits come from the cattle. If after a year you decide you want me gone, I'll take my initial investment and be on my way. Olivia was speechless. The proposal was unexpected and she had to admit tempting, but caution made her wary. Why would you do this? You don't know me, Samuel. For all you know, I could be a terrible rancher. Samuel's blue eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. I'm a fair judge of character, Olivia. And I know good land when I see it. As for why. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Let's just say I've been drifting for a long time, looking for the right place to put down roots. Something tells me this might be it. It's a generous offer, Olivia said slowly. But I need to think about it. This was Thomas's dream, and now it would be partly yours. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I understand, Samuel nodded. It's a big decision. Take all the time you need well until next Friday at least. His attempt at humor drew a small smile from Olivia. I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow, she promised. Will you be staying at Mrs. Abernathy's? I will, he confirmed, finishing his coffee and standing. And Olivia, whatever you decide, I meant what I said in the church. Nothing's impossible. As he rode away, Olivia remained on the porch, her thoughts a jumble of hope, doubt, and an unexpected flutter in her chest whenever she recalled the earnest look in Samuel's eyes as he'd made his proposal. That night, Olivia returned to the church, seeking clarity in the quiet sanctuary. She found Reverend Miller arranging hymnals in the pews. Mrs. Jenkins, he greeted her warmly. Come to light another candle. Actually, Reverend, I came seeking advice, Olivia admitted, taking a seat in the front pew. Briefly, she outlined Samuel's proposal, watching the Reverend's face for his reaction. I see, he said when she had finished. And what does your heart tell you about this offer? Olivia sighed. That's the problem. My heart is still grieving Thomas. How can I trust it to guide me in this? Reverend Miller sat beside her, his kind eyes understanding. Grief is a journey, not a destination, Mrs. Jenkins. It doesn't end, but it changes. Becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you. He paused. As for Mr. Keating, I can't tell you if his proposal is right for you. But I will say that I spoke with him this morning when he came asking about you. He did. Olivia was surprised. He wanted to know if you were well regarded in town, if your husband had been a good man, if you had family nearby who might object to his proposal, the Reverend explained. These are not the questions of a man with dishonorable intentions. Olivia absorbed this information. What did you tell him? The truth. Reverend Miller smiled. That you are one of the most hard-working, honest women I know, that your husband was a good man who loved you dearly. And that you have no family here, which is why the whole town has tried to look after you in your time of need. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. Thank you, Reverend. There's one more thing, he added. Mr. Keating made a donation to the church this morning. A rather generous one, with the specific request that it be used to help widows and orphans in our community. This final piece of information settled something in Olivia's mind. She thanked the Reverend and left the church, her decision made. The next day, she rode into town early and went directly to Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house. The kindly older woman directed her to the small dining room where Samuel sat alone, reading a newspaper over a plate of eggs and bacon. "Good morning, Samuel," Olivia said, removing her bonnet as she approached his table. He stood immediately, folding the newspaper and pulling out a chair for her. "Olivia, you're out and about early. I wanted to catch you before you made other plans," she explained, sitting down. "I've thought about your proposal." Samuel resumed his seat, his expression carefully neutral. "And I accept," Olivia said, meeting his gaze steadily, "but I have conditions." A smile spread across Samuel's face, lighting his blue eyes. "I would expect nothing less. Name them." "First, we draw up a proper contract with the lawyer in town, spelling out the terms of our arrangement," Olivia began. "Second, while you'll be a partner in the business, the land remains in my name. Third, we keep separate living arrangements. You can use the old bunkhouse. It needs some repair, but it's sound." Samuel nodded to each point. "All reasonable. Anything else?" Olivia hesitated, then continued. "Yes, this is a business arrangement, Samuel. I'm still mourning my husband. I need you to understand that." "I do understand," he said softly. "I'm not looking to replace what you lost, Olivia, just to help you keep what's rightfully yours." Relief washed over her. "Then we have an agreement." They shook hands across the table, and Olivia couldn't help but notice the warmth of his palm against hers, the gentle strength in his grip. For a moment, she felt a flicker of something that had been absent for too long: hope. True to his word, Samuel paid the bank the full amount owed, securing Olivia's ranch from foreclosure. They signed a contract with the town lawyer, formalizing their partnership, and Samuel moved his few possessions into the bunkhouse. Over the next few days, he set about repairing the roof and replacing broken windows, transforming the small building into a comfortable living space. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came the hard work of ranch life. Samuel proved to be an invaluable partner, his years of experience with cattle evident in everything he did. He introduced new methods for managing the herd, built a more efficient irrigation system for the garden, and even traded work with neighboring ranchers to get help mending fences and branding calves. Olivia found herself adapting to this new rhythm of life. She and Samuel fell into an easy routine, sharing breakfast and dinner at the main house, working side by side during the day and retiring to their separate dwellings at night. They talked of cattle prices and weather patterns, of which seeds to plant and which repairs to prioritize. Gradually, their conversations expanded to include personal histories. Olivia learned that Samuel had grown up on a small farm in Kentucky, had lost both parents to influenza when he was 20, and had been working his way west ever since. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Missouri, her courtship with Thomas, and their dreams of building something lasting in the Arizona territory. What surprised Olivia most was how comfortable she felt with Samuel. His presence on the ranch, rather than feeling like an intrusion on her memories of Thomas, somehow made those memories easier to bear. There were still moments of sharp grief, days when she found herself weeping over some small reminder of her husband. But increasingly, there were also days filled with purpose and even moments of laughter. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Samuel was whittling a small piece of wood, his hands working with the same quiet competence they brought to every task. "What are you making?" Olivia asked, Curious about the small shape taking form under his knife, Samuel held it up a tiny horse, its details emerging from the pale wood. "Just keeping my hands busy. My father taught me to whittle when I was a boy, said it was good for thinking. And what are you thinking about?" The question slipped out before Olivia could consider its propriety. Samuel's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "The future," he said simply. Then, with a slight smile, he added, "and cattle prices, always cattle prices." Olivia laughed, grateful for his tactful retreat from what might have become an awkward moment. Yet later that night, alone in her bed, she found herself wondering what future Samuel envisioned. And more troublingly, why the thought of him someday leaving the ranch as their contract allowed created a hollow feeling in her chest. August brought scorching heat and the threat of another drought. The small creek that ran through the property began to shrink, and the cattle grew restless, searching for better grazing. Samuel spent long days moving the herd between pastures, trying to conserve the grass while ensuring the animals had enough to eat. One particularly hot afternoon, Olivia rode out to bring him water, finding him near the northern boundary of the property. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his face reddened by the sun despite the hat that shaded his features. "You'll make yourself sick in this heat," Olivia chided, handing him the canteen. "The cattle can wait until evening when it's cooler." Samuel drank deeply before answering. "These beasts don't understand about waiting," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Besides, I've worked in worse." Olivia shook her head at his stubbornness, a trait they shared. "At least take a short rest. I brought some food as well." They sat in the shade of a lone oak tree, sharing the bread, cheese, and dried apple slices Olivia had packed. The heat made talking an effort, so they ate in companionable silence, watching the cattle graze on the sparse grass nearby. "We should consider selling some of the herd," Samuel said eventually. "The prices are good right now, and it would give the land a better chance to recover if we're carrying fewer animals." "How many were you thinking?" Olivia asked, practical concerns overriding the sentimental attachment she felt to the cattle Thomas had raised. "Maybe 15 head, Samuel suggested. "The older steers that will fetch the best price. We could use the money to buy feed for the winter and still have some profit." Olivia nodded her agreement. "When would you want to take them to market?" "I was thinking I'd drive them to Prescott next week," Samuel said. "Be gone 3 or 4 days at most." The prospect of Samuel leaving, even briefly, created an unexpected anxiety in Olivia. "I could come with you," she offered. "Help with the drive." Samuel smiled, seeming to understand her unspoken concern. "I'd welcome the company, but someone needs to stay with the rest of the herd. Don't worry, Olivia. I gave you my word that I'd be your partner for a year, and I'm a man who keeps his promises." "I know you are," she said softly. "It's just what?" he prompted when she didn't continue. Olivia struggled to articulate feelings she barely understood herself. "The ranch feels different with you here, better. I suppose I've grown used to having you around." Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, hope, perhaps, or a deeper emotion he wasn't ready to name. "I've grown used to being here too," he admitted. "More than I expected to." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Olivia found herself noticing the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled damply at his temples, the kindness in his eyes that had been there from their first meeting in the church. The moment was broken by the distant rumble of thunder. They both looked up to see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Rain," Samuel said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God." They packed up quickly and split up to gather the cattle, driving them toward the safety of the home pasture before the storm hit. By the time they reached the ranch house, the first heavy drops were falling, and the sky had darkened to an ominous gray. They stabled their horses and ran for the porch just as the heavens opened, releasing a torrent of rain that turned the dusty yard into mud within minutes. Standing under the porch roof, they watched the downpour with matching expressions of joy and relief. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, watching the rain soak into the parched earth. "Yes," Samuel agreed, though when she turned to look at him, she found him watching her rather than the rain. "Beautiful?" Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings that had been growing quietly over the summer months. Olivia felt a blush rise to her cheeks and turned back to the rain, unsure how to respond to the admiration in Samuel's gaze. "I should get back to the bunkhouse before it gets worse," Samuel said after a moment, though he made no move to leave the shelter of the porch. "You'll be soaked through," Olivia protested. "Stay for dinner at least until the worst passes." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, I'll just check on something in the barn first." He dashed out into the rain, leaving Olivia to wonder at the sudden awkwardness between them. She went inside to prepare dinner, her thoughts a confusing mixture of guilt and anticipation. Thomas had been gone only 4 months. Was it disloyal to feel this flutter of attraction to another man so soon? By the time Samuel returned, damp but composed, Olivia had prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of the preserved peaches from the previous summer. They ate by lamplight as rain drummed on the roof, their conversation carefully confined to ranch matters and plans for the cattle sale. After dinner, Samuel insisted on helping with the dishes, standing beside Olivia at the wash basin, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they worked. Each accidental touch sent a current of awareness through Olivia, making her fumble with the wet plates. "I'm sorry," Samuel said after she nearly dropped a cup. "I'm making you nervous, I should go." "No," Olivia said quickly, then more calmly. "No, it's not that, I'm just confused." Samuel set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "About what, Olivia?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "About how I feel, about what Thomas would think, about whether it's too soon to." "To what?" Samuel asked gently when she trailed off. "To feel something for someone else," Olivia whispered, finally looking up at him. Samuel's expression softened. "Olivia, I would never ask you to forget Thomas or to rush your grief. What you had with him was real and precious, and nothing can or should diminish that." "I know," she said. "But sometimes when I'm with you, I forget to be sad, and then I feel guilty for forgetting, even for a moment." Samuel took her hand, his touch light and respectful. "Thomas loved you. Would he want you to be alone and unhappy forever?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "No. He told me once when he first got sick that if anything happened to him, he wanted me to find happiness again. I just didn't expect to find it so soon or with someone like you." "Someone like me," Samuel echoed, a slight smile touching his lips. "Someone who came into my life so unexpectedly," Olivia clarified. "Someone who lit a candle in an empty church and changed everything." Samuel's hand tightened around hers. "Olivia, I need to be honest with you. When I made my proposal, it was partly business. I do believe in this ranch and its potential. But even then, there was something about you that drew me. Your strength, your dignity in the face of loss. I told myself I would be content with a partnership, that I wouldn't ask for more than you were ready to give, and I meant it." "And now?" Olivia asked, her heart beating faster. "Now I find myself hoping that someday you might be ready for more," Samuel admitted. "But I won't rush you, and I'll understand if that day never comes." Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders at his words. "I can't make any promises, Samuel. I'm still finding my way through this grief. But I do know that having you here has brought light back into my life when I thought it would be dark forever." Samuel raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then for now, that's enough." The storm raged on outside, but inside the small ranch house, a different kind of storm was calming the tumult of conflicting emotions, giving way to a tentative understanding and the first fragile tendrils of new love. The days that followed brought a new awareness between them. Small glances held a moment longer, conversations that delved deeper, a growing ease in each other's company that spoke of more than mere partnership. Samuel still slept in the bunkhouse and maintained a respectful distance, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement that something had changed. As planned, Samuel took 15 cattle to market in Prescott, returning 4 days later with a good price and supplies for the winter. Olivia was surprised by how much she had missed him and how bright the ranch seemed with his return. September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn to the high desert. The summer rains had revived the land, and the remaining cattle grew fat on the renewed pastures. Under Samuel's careful management and Olivia's hard work, the ranch was beginning to prosper again. One crisp Sunday morning in late September, they rode into town together for church services. It was the first time Olivia had attended since Thomas's funeral, her grief having kept her away from the congregation's well-meaning but often painful expressions of sympathy. As they entered the small church, Olivia was conscious of curious glances and whispered comments. Everyone in Cottonwood Springs knew of her arrangement with Samuel, and speculation had been rampant about the nature of their relationship. Reverend Miller greeted them warmly, his kind eyes showing approval as Samuel escorted Olivia to a pew near the middle of the church. Throughout the service, Samuel maintained a respectful distance, but his presence beside her gave Olivia a strength she hadn't expected to feel. After the service, as the congregation filed out into the autumn sunshine, several of the townspeople approached to greet them. Mrs. Abernathy, the boarding house owner, clasped Olivia's hands warmly. "It's so good to see you back in church, dear," she said, "and you're looking well better than I've seen you in months." "Thank you," Olivia replied, aware of Samuel standing protectively nearby. "The ranch is doing better, and that lifts my spirits." "I'm sure that's not all that lifts your spirits," Mrs. Abernathy said with a meaningful glance at Samuel, who pretended not to hear as he chatted with the blacksmith. Olivia felt herself blush, but didn't deny the older woman's implication. Instead, she changed the subject, asking after Mrs. Abernathy's grandchildren. As they prepared to leave town, Samuel surprised Olivia by suggesting they have lunch at the small hotel restaurant, a rare treat in their usually frugal lives. "What's the occasion?" Olivia asked as they were seated at a table near the window. "6 months," Samuel said, his blue eyes warm as they met hers across the table. "It's been 6 months since I came to Cottonwood Springs and found you in the church." Olivia was touched that he had remembered the date. "So much has changed since then." "For the better, I hope." There was a hint of vulnerability in his question. "For the better," Olivia confirmed, "though there are still difficult days." "There always will be," Samuel said, "but I hope there will be more good days than bad as time goes on." After their meal, they walked to the general store to purchase supplies. As Olivia selected coffee and flour, she overheard 2 women talking in the next aisle. "They say he's sweet on her," one woman whispered. "Been living out there all summer, supposedly in the bunkhouse, but who knows?" "It's indecent," the other replied. "Her husband barely cold in his grave, and she's already found a replacement." Olivia froze, the harsh words striking at her deepest insecurities about her growing feelings for Samuel. Before she could move or respond, Samuel appeared beside her, having heard the exchange as well. "Ladies," he said, his voice firm but polite, "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. And while I usually mind my own business, I feel compelled to speak up when someone I care about is being maligned." The women had the grace to look embarrassed, but Samuel continued before they could respond. "Mrs. Jenkins is one of the most honorable women I've ever had the privilege to know. Our arrangement is exactly what we've stated it to be, a business partnership that has helped save a ranch that would otherwise have been lost. If your concern is for propriety, I suggest you direct it elsewhere." Taking Olivia's elbow gently, he guided her to the counter to pay for their purchases. Olivia remained silent until they had left the store and were walking toward their horses. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Samuel replied. "Small minds will always find something to gossip about, but I won't stand by while they hurt you with their speculation." Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Thank you, not just for defending me, but for understanding how important it is to me that we've done nothing wrong, that we've honored Thomas's memory even as we've built something new." Samuel's expression softened. "Olivia, I made you a promise in that church 6 months ago, not with words, perhaps, but with that candle I lit. I promised to bring light back into your life if I could, to be whatever you needed me to be for as long as you needed it. And if what I need is more than a business partner?" Olivia asked, her heart pounding as she gave voice to the question that had been growing in her mind for weeks. "Then I would be honored," Samuel said simply, But only when you're ready, not a moment before. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts about the future and the changing nature of their relationship. As they crested the hill that overlooked their property, Olivia was struck by how right it felt to think of it as theirs rather than hers or Thomas's. The ranch spread out below them, the small house and outbuildings nestled among cottonwood trees, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. It was not a grand property by any means, but it was home, and increasingly, it was home because Samuel was there. That evening after dinner, they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Samuel was whittling again, his hands moving steadily as he worked on a new piece. Olivia was mending one of his shirts, her needle flashing in the lamplight from the window behind them. "What are you making this time?" she asked, nodding toward the wood taking shape in his hands. Samuel held it up, a small church, its steeple and windows intricately detailed. "Thought I'd try something a bit more challenging than horses and cattle." Olivia set down her mending to take the carving, examining it with admiration. "It's beautiful, Samuel. You have a true gift." "My father used to say that working with your hands helps heal your heart," Samuel said. "I think he was right." Olivia returned the carving, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Samuel agreed. "He would have liked you, said a man should look for a woman with strength in her spine and kindness in her heart. You have both." The compliment warmed Olivia. "And what would your mother have said about me?" Samuel chuckled. "She would have approved of your cooking and your gardening, but mostly she would have been glad to see me finally settling down instead of drifting from ranch to ranch." "Are you?" Olivia asked softly, "settling down?" Samuel set aside his carving and turned to face her fully. "I'd like to, Olivia. Here with you if you'll have me." The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Olivia thought of Thomas, of the life they had planned together, of the grief that had nearly consumed her. And then she thought of Samuel, of the quiet strength he had brought into her life, of the candle he had lit in a darkened church, of the promise of a future she had thought forever lost. "Our contract says you can leave after a year if you choose," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I find I don't want you to go, Samuel. Not in 6 months, not ever." Samuel reached for her hand, enfolding it in his own. "Then I'll stay, Olivia, for as long as you want me." "Forever." The word hung in the air between them, a question and a hope combined. "Forever," Samuel confirmed, his blue eyes shining with certainty in the starlight. "I promise you that, as surely as I promised it with that candle 6 months ago." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Samuel leaned forward. Olivia met him halfway, her heart racing as their lips touched in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief and sweet, a beginning rather than a culmination, a promise of more to come when they were both ready. When they drew apart, Olivia felt no guilt, only a quiet certainty that Thomas would have approved of the man who had saved not just her ranch but her heart as well. "I should go," Samuel said, though he made no move to leave. "It's getting late." "Stay," Olivia said impulsively, then clarified at his raised eyebrow. "Not like that, just on the porch a little longer. The night is too beautiful to end just yet." Samuel smiled, settling back in his chair. "As the lady wishes." They talked long into the night, sharing dreams and memories, building a bridge between past and future. And when Samuel finally walked to the bunkhouse in the small hours of the morning, it was with the knowledge that someday soon he would not have to leave at all. Winter came to the Arizona territory, bringing crisp, cold nights and brilliant, sunny days. The ranch thrived under their joint care, the cattle fat and healthy, the fences mended, the house warmer and more welcoming than it had been in years. On Christmas Eve, 1 year to the day since Thomas had first shown signs of the illness that would claim his life, Olivia visited his grave in the small cemetery outside town. She placed a wreath of evergreen on the simple marker and stood for a long moment in silent communion with the man she had loved and lost. "I think you would approve, Thomas," she said aloud. "He's a good man, different from you but good in his own way, and he makes me happy." The winter wind rustled through the bare branches of the oak trees that dotted the cemetery, and Olivia took it as an answer. a blessing from beyond. She returned to the ranch to find Samuel waiting on the porch, a small package in his hands. Inside the house, a Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper stars and candles, a tradition Samuel had brought from his Kentucky childhood. "I have something for you," he said, holding out the package. "It's not much, but—" Olivia unwrapped it carefully to find the carved church he had been working on, now completed and polished to a warm glow. Inside the tiny building, visible through the open doors, was a single candle, carved with such delicacy that it seemed almost real. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate details. "Turn it over," Samuel suggested. On the base of the carving, Samuel had burned an inscription. "To Olivia in darkness I found you, in light I love you, forever Samuel." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she read the words. "Samuel, I know it's only been 8 months," he said quickly, "and if you're not ready, I understand, but I love you, Olivia. I think I have since that first night in the church." Olivia set the carving carefully on the table and took both his hands in hers. "I love you too, Samuel, and I'm ready for everything." Samuel's face lit with joy. "Does that mean—" "Yes," Olivia nodded, her heart full to bursting. "If you're asking what I think you're asking, the answer is yes." Samuel swept her into his arms, his kiss no longer tentative but confident, filled with the promise of the future they would build together. They were married in the small church in Cottonwood Springs on New Year's Day, 1879, with Reverend Miller officiating and the entire town in attendance. Even the women who had gossiped in the general store came to wish them well, won over by the obvious love between the bride and groom. As they exchanged vows, candles burned brightly on the altar, one for Thomas, honoring the past, and one for Samuel and Olivia, lighting the way to their future together. And when Samuel promised to love and cherish Olivia for all the days of his life, she knew with absolute certainty that this was a promise he would keep. Forever, just as he had vowed on that April evening when a grieving widow sat crying in an empty church, and a cowboy lit a candle and changed her world.